Welcome into the Big City Sports Podcast. We have another episode coming up, and we're going to briefly mention the Chicago White Sox news that took place, the retirement of Yermín Mercedes and Lance Lynn getting the contract extension, and we're getting into the NHL expansion draft. The players lost for the Blackhawks, Rangers, and Islanders, and then we're also going to be talking about the upcoming NHL draft and what we expect from that. But before we get into everything, Slig, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, man. You and I were basically talking through the end of the Yankees game that just finished tonight. That was an incredibly bizarre win that I'm glad finished up before we started recording. So now I can focus. This is a time of year I usually enjoy with the NHL and NBA off seasons being so close together with the drafts and free agencies. And this year it's even more condensed. I know we're going to get into the NBA draft talk next week, but yeah, NHL expansion draft was tonight, Wednesday at the time of recording. NHL draft is on Friday and free agency starts next week. It's going to be crazy. We got a lot of material for you guys.
Yeah, I'm excited to bring that. We have a lot planned. We might potentially have a guest for the NBA episode that comes out next Thursday. So we'll keep in mind about that, but let's jump right in. Let's look at the White Sox. Lance Lynn got the 2-year, $38 million extension with an option for the a third year on that contract. So he's pitching really well this year, a leader of that staff. I know Giolito last year, the year before that, was really talented, did a lot for them. But Lance Lynn has really been the consistent pitcher in that rotation this year. I'm glad to see him stick around a little bit longer on the South Side.
Yeah, I think it's a really smart move by the White Sox and Lance Lynn. And I know he would have been capable of getting more money on the market. He's hit free agency a couple times in his career. It's been pretty underwhelming. He was always a solid pitcher with the Cardinals. He had a brief stint with the Yankees a couple of years ago that was fine. I mean, it's just he's always been a pretty dependable but never spectacular pitcher. But now he's really hit another gear with the White Sox, bringing an energy and a swagger, and most importantly, an effectiveness to that rotation that has been a strength of a very good team all season long. And he had an interesting quote. I read one of the articles about him signing the extension. Why didn't you try to get to the open market and make more money? And he basically said, at this point in my career, it's more about I know where I want to be. Lynn's a veteran pitcher. He's on a contending team. He's made a decent amount of money in his career. He'll make more with this deal, 2 years, $38 million, team option for 2024. So he's clearly focused on winning a championship. He knows he has a great opportunity to do it. And I thought it was smart of him to just keep this from becoming a distraction.
Yeah, Lance Lynn debuted with the Cardinals, you mentioned. Great pitcher for them. Tony La Russa was the manager, his first manager, so he's comfortable being with him again. One person that was not very comfortable with Tony La Russa was Yermín Mercedes, and Mercedes ends up retiring today. Just a bizarre moment there. Did not really expect it. He came out of the woodworks earlier. He put something on social media teasing it, but he officially made that happen with an Instagram post later on saying, this is it for me, at least for right now, walking away from the game. So definitely a bold thing coming out from Yermín Mercedes, who had a great April.
Yeah, I was honestly thinking that exact same transition from comfortable to not comfortable. It's funny, man. You read my mind on that one. But Yermín Mercedes had that amazing start to the season. He was 8 for his first 8 this year, which I think tied or set a record for most hits to start a season. And then was leading the American League in batting average up until late May. He was in the 360s. Now, we knew that some regression was going to come from that regardless. But then he had the series against Minnesota where he hit the home run on a 3-0 pitch that pissed off the Twins for some reason, and actually pissed off Tony La Russa more than anyone else. And then he didn't have a problem when he was thrown at, and he was sent down to the minors and was hitting pretty well there. And then hints at the very least stepping away from the game. The most recent thing I read, I saw the Instagram post, and the White Sox themselves said that they were aware of it, but he hadn't officially filed that retirement paperwork yet. So there could still be something changing with this fluid situation, but it's been 3.5 months. What a weird season for him.
Yeah, he's hitting 309 in Charlotte right now, AAA, and he got this is an interesting note no one's really talked about. He got pinch hit for in the 6th inning today in his game in Charlotte AAA, and he might have just randomly announced his retirement during the middle of the game, or he was feeling, hey, I might be on the move, I might be getting traded, or why are they pinch hitting for me? It's AAA baseball. I've led the major leagues in batting average through a couple months this season. I don't understand. Either you're treating me like crap and not giving me opportunities, but you could also look up at the roster. You lose a catcher in Yasmani Grandal. You bring up CV Zavalda. And ever since Mercedes has been to AAA, he's been playing catcher. He hasn't been DHing. So it could have a little bit of a spin on him like, hey, I'm a catcher. Let me catch.
Yeah, it's bizarre, man. It's baffling. I don't have a ton to say about it. If it's true that he just said, I'm going to retire in the middle of the sixth inning, maybe he's thinking, fuck it, I'll be like Vontae Davis and just retire at halftime. And the other thing I had for this one, I always got to think of something. It's not quite the same. This is giving me at least somewhat similar vibes to when Yoenis Cespedes just randomly disappeared before a Mets game. I think it was last season. And then it seemed like the Mets were just legitimately concerned for his safety.
Right.
And then it came out that he opted out of the season. And I know they're not quite the same, but it kind of gave me a similar feeling just of something completely unexpected and in a way concerning. So Mercedes, I hope whatever he decides to do when it comes to playing is doing okay or will be okay eventually. I'm not trying to speculate that anything's wrong. It's just an unusual situation. I hope he's okay. And if he is done playing, I congratulate him on making the major leagues and having a career that's more than 99% of us will ever do, and wish him well in whatever he does next.
Well said. Well said. And as we're talking about players wishing well and what they're doing next, the Chicago Blackhawks have parted ways with John Quenneville, who actually got selected by Seattle Kraken in the expansion draft that took place on Wednesday night. So John Quenneville, a surprise take by the Seattle Kraken. I was truly blown away by that. I don't know what news caught me more surprised today, the Mercedes news or John Quenneville being selected by the Kraken.
I definitely think it's the John Quenneville news for me. And for anyone wondering, we are going to make sure we keep every listener updated on the Blackhawks legal situation. There hasn't been any meaningful legal update on the on that since the last time we recorded. But if whenever the next news trickles out or the next step in the legal case is, we will let everyone know. For now, we have some more on ice stuff to talk about. And for anyone who wasn't aware, the NHL is adding a team for next season. That's going to be the Seattle Kraken that you mentioned. And right now, every team is lost one player to them in the expansion draft. So for anyone who doesn't know, that's the gist of what we're going for here. And the Blackhawks seemed likely to lose one of three players in my mind. And correct me if you think I'm wrong here. I thought it was going to be one of two defensemen, which was Calvin DeHaan, who has 1 year left on his contract, making about $4.5 million, or Nikita Zadorov, who I mentioned I hated that acquisition at the beginning, but who's an okay defensive defenseman. He is a restricted free agent right now, meaning that if the Blackhawks give him what's called a qualifying offer, they could match any offer that another team signs him to, rather than an unrestricted free agent where a player can just go wherever they want. So I thought it was going to be one of those two players, or the only forward I thought might have been considered was Adam Gaudette. But instead, the Kraken went off the board here with John Quenneville, who let's just say hasn't been a factor at the NHL or AHL levels as a forward. And that's the polite way to say it. And I really think that these two teams have something worked out as a side deal. We saw Vegas do that a lot in the last expansion draft. The Kraken definitely have something up their sleeve. Otherwise, this doesn't make any fucking sense.
Yeah, John Quenneville is not going to play a game for the Seattle Kraken. That's my bold prediction. I don't know if it's necessarily bold, but I truly don't think that he will play a game for the Seattle Kraken. I think he's going to end up being demoted to the AHL if he stays there. Wherever he ends up, I don't think he plays a game in the National Hockey League for the Seattle Kraken this year. That's just my thought process on it. But you brought up two good names there on defense, and that's the defenseman Nikita Zadorov, and it's also Calvin DeHaan, two great defensemen on the left side. You lose Duncan Keith, you could potentially lose all three of them. The veterans on that defense, a lot of young kids there. Now, I'm with you with the Nikita Zadorov thing, with putting him in a package, if you will, try to trade some of these players. So I don't necessarily know which one is more valuable. Which one do you think warrants the most trade value right now?
I think DeHaan is a better player. I think Zadorov might have slightly more value if you find a team that believes in his physicality, just because he's younger. DeHaan is 1 year left. He's older. He wouldn't cost more than, I'd say, third, fourth round pick at the most to acquire in a more typical trade. Just thinking out loud there, a guy like Andy Green or Braden Coburn's going for a 6th or 7th round pick for the Islanders. I don't see DeHaan being worth more than that. Nobody will value Zadorov as much as the Blackhawks did with Brandon Saad, but since he's younger, I think it's possible somebody who wants a little bit of snarl or toughness or some other attribute that doesn't help you win hockey games might be willing to pay a little more. But I don't think even with this, where neither of them were selected by Seattle, I still don't think it's a guarantee that the Blackhawks bring Zadorov back. They could qualify him and re-sign him for a year. They could qualify him and then just trade him, or they could just not qualify him at all, which would allow him to become an unrestricted free agent. And I don't think that's off the table either. Sometimes you just need to know when to cut your losses.
Yeah, I think this is one you just chalk up to a missed opportunity, a failed opportunity. So Stan Bowman, look yourself in the mirror right now and realize you went Panarin for Saad, for Zadorov, for to be determined. And it's probably not going to be anything if you cut ties with them. So great job there in the front office, as you usually do. You knocked it out of the park. So looking at the other end of it, now I do think Calvin DeHaan could potentially be someone that the Blackhawks bring back. And I know this is more free agency stuff and what's happening, but there is going to be a move that's made, whether it's with the draft or before the draft, or it's right now, or it could be in a few hours, depending if what releases here after the 1:00 deadline with the NHL trade deadline or the NHL expansion draft. The final breakdown of everything.
The roster freeze.
Roster freeze. There you go. Trying to find the word for it, but it's just a tough situation right here for the Blackhawks where you don't know what they're going to do. As a fan, you're freaking out. You don't know what's going to come through the table. Did they give up a haul for Seth Jones? You'll find out later on. So it's a tough spot for the Hawks. There's a lot of questions to be answered, and I just don't know which one they're going to answer.
Yeah, well, time will tell is the only thing we can say right now. But I think time will tell pretty soon, honestly. There's going to be a lot of activity around the league. I expect the Blackhawks to be one of the busier teams. I'm not just referring to the off-ice legal issues, which will keep them busy regardless. They have a very unusual off season here for a variety of reasons, both on and off the ice. They have a lot to take care of. And I know we touched on the Seth Jones speculation last week, so I recommend anyone who might be interested in that, go listen to last week's episode. But for this episode, more focusing on the guys they do have right now. They have Caleb Jones on defense. They have Mitchell. They have a couple other guys. I'm very curious to see what they do. And now that they have Adam Gaudette sticking around, I could see him having a solid bottom 6 role. Outside of that, you want to talk briefly about who they might target in the first round of the normal NHL draft on Friday?
I do. Now, I do think if you're looking at the roster configuration for the Hawks heading into next season, they're going to add defense. It's what they're going to do. I know that they have some youngsters. You mentioned Mitchell, Adam Boquist, a top line guy, whether you like it or not. I don't like it at all. Like I mentioned, he's going to be a 20-goal scoring forward in the NHL. That was my bold take. But anyway, Adam Boquist is a part of that defense. You have some young players there. You still have Riley Stillman you acquired. So there is still some pieces on that defense. I think they're adding to the defense. And you look at what they've done so far. They're going to spend their money on defense like they did early on in their days of success. You pay Seabrook, you pay Keith. And I know they did let Nick Leddy, Nicholas Chalmerson go, but essentially they're going to pay for the defense, and you find the forwards that you have. You found a Dominic Cahoon out of nowhere. You found a Dominic Kubalik out of nowhere. You found Alex DeBrincat. You end up bringing in Philip Kurashev. I mean, you're just pulling Pius Suter. I mean, your forward depth of scouting is just insane. So I think they're going to stick with that process of, hey, we can get forwards that can score. You already have Kane Taves, and then you have DeBrincat, the good goal scorer. You have a ton of just goal scoring on that team. Kirby Dach comes back for a full year. Dylan Strome. So there's enough there where I think that they could target another center in the draft. I think Kent Johnson from Michigan's a good target if he's still on the board. A lot of people think he could end up being a top 10 pick. The Hawks hold the 12th pick in the draft. Another name that I would really be interested in, and this is a defensive project that you end up working through your system as you have with Mitchell and the many others that have tried through it. Corson Ceulemans. He's committed to Wisconsin right now. I think he's going to be a nice defenseman for this Hawks team if he could get him in the first round.
Couple of things. Now, I do like both of those players. I really do. And the Blackhawks actually have the 11th pick because the Coyotes do not have one for combine violations that they did last
That's
year.
right. They've moved
So
up.
they had 11 originally. So Chicago and everyone behind them will move up a spot, which helps slightly. Now, I agree that he will be off the board, I think, before the 11th pick. I think somebody will take a chance on him before that. I'm gonna go a little wild card here. I think the Blackhawks are gonna draft a goalie with their first pick. And I think I could see maybe one goalie going in the top 10. If not, every goalie will be on the board if the Blackhawks go that route. I think there are still some questions about Lankinen long term. He had a really nice rookie season. Are you convinced that that's really him yet? Not yet, at least. And Malcolm Subban is a pretty average number 2, number 3 hybrid goalie. Yeah, I'm not sure how high you are on Delia, however the fuck you say his name. I always forget. But I'm not super high on him either myself. So if I'm the Blackhawks, I'm at least considering a Jesper Wallstedt or a Sebastian Koza at that spot. You saw in the playoffs this year with the Florida Panthers. Now, hindsight here, they signed Bobrovsky to a huge contract right after they drafted Spencer Knight 13th overall. And Knight should be a goalie of the future. The Blackhawks have an opportunity. I'm not trying to compare these goalies to Spencer Knight and say that they're going to win the World Juniors by the time they get to the NHL. But if you can draft your potential goalie of the future there, and you do not have a goalie on a ridiculously stupid contract right now, there's a lot more upside there to make him the starter in, say, 2 or 3 years when he's ready for the pros.
That's fair. They did end up drafting a goaltender in the second round last year with Drew Comesso, or however you say his name. So, I mean, it really depends on how much you believe in him, because Lankinen, you've really seen so far, like Lankinen has had one season of experience. You got to see him in net for a longer period of time. I mean, heck, Scott Darling's had a good season in his career, and he's really fallen off the face of the earth, unfortunately. But, I mean, you really have to believe, like, you need to keep the pipeline hot, because goalies are good to come by. They're good to win with, and you need to have 2 of them. The good teams win with 2. I know Vasilevsky just did something out of the ordinary, but you do have 2 good goaltenders. You need a nice tandem to win in the NHL. So I wouldn't be shocked to see him go goalie, but I mean, it's basically a slap to the face to Drew Comesso, who you took last year.
And I did think of that, and I thought he had a solid season, still playing where he is, but I don't think that's enough of an investment to preclude them from taking a goalie in the first round if they think he's the best player available. That's the only thing. And I really don't, if Johnson's off the board, if a couple of these other players are off the board, it's usually a bad idea to reach for somebody that's going to be picked, say, 17th at 11, whatever the situation is, unless they're really, really high upside swing for the fences type. If they're trying to draft a player who is considered more safe, high floor, I can speak from experience from Lias Andersson that's not usually going to work out very well. And even if it does, you're playing for a 3rd line center or a second pair defenseman. And I'm thinking if you're the Blackhawks, whatever position you draft, you want more than that out of the 11th overall pick. I'd rather, as a fan of any team, I'd rather swing and miss with a high upside player than try to play it safe and get a decent player, because you can sign guys like that in free agency.
That's true. You make a good point there. I personally, I like best available. If the goaltender if he's number 1 on your board when the time it gets there, might as well make the pick. But before we get into the Rangers, I do want to ask you, what is the percentage that the Blackhawks trade that pick?
I don't think it's out of the question. I don't think it's quite as likely as the Rangers trading their own pick, and we'll get into that shortly. I would give it about a 25% chance. I don't think it's likely, but I don't think it's out of the question either. How about you?
I'd sit around 35%. I think it could be a curveball on draft day. Like, they might trade down, trade up a little bit. Like, I don't think they'll trade up, actually. I do think if they do trade, it's trading down. Maybe you end up with any of these trades that happen tomorrow if the Blackhawks end up moving one of those defensemen we talked about. You just never know. So it's going to be wild here these next few days for the entire NHL, but the Blackhawks included on that one. And let's get into the Rangers real quick. And the New York Rangers are in a nice situation to potentially really, really like make a trade to bring in a superstar. But before we get into that, we have to look at who they lost in the Seattle Kraken expansion draft. That's Colin Blackwell. He's going to go over to Seattle. It was a tough call on who they were going to select there, but I mean, Blackwell was their choice. How do you feel about it?
Look, I like Blackwell a lot. I really do. We signed him to a 1-year contract before this season. He was a guy who had played only about, I want to say, 30 NHL games for the Predators, bounced back and forth. He's 28 years old. We signed him to a contract for about 750,000 a year, just taking a flyer on the guy. He had a career year. He had 12 goals and 10 assists, I believe, playing mostly on a line with Artemi Panarin and Ryan Strome. But I think the Rangers did pretty well here, all things considered. I think they have actually handled the last 2 expansion drafts pretty well. It worked out well 4 years ago with Vegas. Now, Michael Grabner was exposed back then, and in hindsight, Vegas should have taken him. But instead, they took Oscar Lindberg, who is already out of the NHL and did nothing. And nothing personal. I don't want that to happen. But it's nice not having that, I guess not buyer's remorse, but exposing the wrong person's remorse. So that one didn't really burn the Rangers. They didn't have to make a side deal. And this time, the Rangers have such a young team. And so many of their players were exempt from it. They didn't even have to worry about protecting them because Seattle couldn't take them. Lafreniere, Kakko, Miller, Fox, Shesterkin, they're all exempt. So that gave the Rangers a lot more flexibility to protect other players. And as much as I like Blackwell and thought he had a solid season, I think he's a 4th line player. He's 28. I don't think he has any more upside at this point in his career. And I also don't think he's likely to replicate the season he just had, because what are the odds he plays with a line mate as skilled as Artemi Panarin again? So I still like what he did. Nothing personal at all. I wish him well in Seattle. I liked him the season he was with New York, but I don't see this one turning into a disaster or anything like that. I think he'll be a solid bottom 6 player for Seattle, like he should have been a 4th liner for the Rangers. And I think it's a relatively minimal loss.
That's fair. I mean, I don't know here. I truly do not know. I think that they could potentially be another move here with the Seattle Kraken. Like, I think that this is not just like, it's sort of the Quenneville thing. Like, I feel Blackwell was not the selection beforehand that Seattle was going to be fully guaranteed on. I think we could potentially see one of these post 1 p.m. deals with the Rangers and the Kraken as well.
No, I absolutely think that's an option, but I think Blackwell could have been the pick regardless. Now, in the Rangers' case, they're going to be linked to just about anybody. They have a pretty good amount of cap space. They're clearly trying to win right now, which I'm still not a big fan of that. But they're going to be aggressive. By the time this episode comes out, or within a day or two after it, the Rangers are going to have made at least 1 or 2 big moves. I still think Pavel Buchnevich or Ryan Strome, or both of them, will not be on the roster in a couple of days. I think Eichel is a real possibility. Like, there's just too many variables in play here for the Rangers not to make a big move one way or the other. Now, in terms of a trade with Seattle, there were a couple thoughts that crossed my mind and were reported on. So it's not just me. There are rumors that the Rangers like Mark Giordano, who Seattle took from the Calgary Flames. The Rangers want a left-handed veteran defenseman. Giordano still can play pretty well, even though he's 37 and only has 1 year left. We could be trading something for him. We could send Strome a package theoretically. It could just be a draft pick considering his contract. There's rumors that Seattle is one of several teams interested in Strome. Buffalo is interested. Ottawa is interested, and I'd frankly rather trade with them because I think they have better pieces in return. But there's going to be a lot happening. So I think there will be a trade. It doesn't have to be with Seattle, but the Rangers will make multiple moves here. In terms of Blackwell himself, he's just looking at the roster the Rangers have right now. He's a right wing. And at the moment, the Rangers have Buchnevich, who's a restricted free agent at that spot. They have Kaapo Kakko. They have Vitaly Kravtsov. And they also have Julien Gauthier, who is the other wild card I wanted to talk about here. He doesn't have the same, let's say, current production that the others have, even though Kravtsov's barely played. But Gauthier is a guy that was a first-round pick in 2016 by the Hurricanes. You know who their GM was back then?
Was that Drury?
No, it was Ron Francis, who's Seattle's GM
right
now. And I'm a little surprised considering Gauthier, while he hasn't done much in the NHL, he's only played 30 games so far. He is a talented, skilled player with some upside who's only 24. I think it's a little too early to write him off. Ron Francis, who's now Seattle's GM, did draft him a few years ago. So I was a little surprised that he wasn't the pick. He could very easily do nothing in the NHL. Blackwell's done more than him so far, but he definitely has more potential. And if I'm the Rangers, I'm happy that they took Blackwell instead, because Gauthier, I think, is a player. He's a guy who crashes the net, has some offensive skill, who could thrive under Gerard Gallant. And even if he doesn't, I would rather take that chance with him on Broadway rather than just losing him in an expansion draft for no return at all.
That's a good point. And looking at what happened there, Ron Francis, he drafted him, so maybe he realizes, okay, maybe I might have missed on this pick when I had the opportunity. I've seen what he's done a little bit. It's a small sample size, like you said, still has the ability to break out. And maybe that was something that sort of just shied him away, or that just speaks to how much he truly believes in Colin Blackwell in that spot. So definitely an interesting mind going on there with Ron Francis. Now, looking at the draft that is taking place here soon, I do have a few names listed there. You don't think the Rangers are making a first round pick, or you don't think they're making their first round pick?
I don't think they're making their first round pick at the very least. I don't think they're making one at all. Look, I could go through every rumor, everything that could possibly make sense, but we'd be here for an hour. That we've talked a little bit off pod. I've been talking with a lot more people as well. There's rumors if Ottawa, who has the 10th pick, for example, wants Strome, we could trade Strome in 15, that the Rangers have the 15th pick to get 10, for example. We could include Strome in a trade for Jack Eichel, who I still think will end up being a Ranger at the end of the day. I'm not, depending on the package, we'll see how I feel about that. There are so many options here. So many trade chips are in play, but if the Rangers make the 15th overall pick and keep it, I will be absolutely shocked. The Rangers do have the luxury at the moment of having a pretty loaded farm system with a very young roster. They don't, frankly, need the 15th overall pick. Not that I would complain to add somebody else, but it is a numbers game. With a young team that's got a lot of talent and is clearly trying to win a Stanley Cup in the next couple of seasons, there's not going to be room on the roster for every single prospect. Some of them are going to be traded for pieces they hope can help them win in the near future. So I think the 15th pick will be one of those pieces. I honestly think it'll end up being included in a trade for Eichel, or it will be included in a trade with a team like Ottawa to get the 10th pick and then throw that in a trade for Eichel or somebody similar instead. In that situation, Buffalo would get 2 top 10 picks, for example. So I think that I honestly don't think the Rangers are making a pick on Friday. If they do, I have 2 names written down here. The Rangers, Eichel's a center. The Rangers need help at center, so I wrote down 2 centers. Chaz Lucius and Atu Ruby. Or Atu Ratti, I apologize. Sorry, but some of these names are a little bit confusing to say. Now, Chaz Lucius is a bit of a polarizing prospect, but considering where the Rangers are picking, I think they might go for somebody who's a bit more of a swing for the fences at that spot.
Before I give you my 2, I want to know how you would feel. Like, are you excited that the Rangers are about to make a potential splash? Or are you like, okay, just let it be casual. Let us take our pick. Let us play hockey. How do you feel?
I am terrified, especially after seeing the Barclay Goodrow deal and the contract he's about to get. Now, I like Goodrow to an extent. That could be a different rant. He's a player who works hard, who does provide some things that help you win hockey games. He's not just a big physical player. He plays good defense. He can play center of the wing, but it's rumored the Rangers are about to sign him for 6 years, $3.6 million a year. That's way too long and too much money. And that will, that money, unless we can trade that contract in a couple years, which is possible, might preclude us from signing a guy like Lafreniere or Keandre Miller down the line. And that would be a big problem. So I'm terrified. Eichel is the guy I honestly think will end up a Ranger. I've said it for a while. And the only other team I think that's still in right now are the Minnesota Wild after they bought out Parisi and Suter's contracts. But it's still going to be hard for them to fit 5 years at $10 million a year left on their payroll, because they're going to be paying both of those guys for 8 more seasons. So the Rangers, if they are smart enough to be like, hey, we're pretty much the only team left in it, you're going to take our shitty offer, you're not going to get rid of him at all, and the situation's only going to get worse, then I'm okay with it. But if they're not smart enough to do that, then they're going to be screwing themselves hard.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's just a weird spot for them. I'm actually, like, as a hockey fan, I'm excited. I want the Rangers to be a winning hockey team, and I know it might not be the best move for the long term, but it might get you some short-term success, and that really truly falls into the coaching staff there, what you're going to see with Gallant and potentially could bring, whether it's early success or whether it's a long-term approach. This draft's going to have a lot to say about it. And if they were going long-term, you mentioned you had 2 centers. I also have 2 centers on my list, both different names. So if they do end up making the pick, we'll see. I have Fedor Svechkov. He's a long-term project. He still has 2 more years in the KHL. So if you're looking for long-term success, so if you end up trading a Niels Lundqvist or anyone else like that deep in your system, you still have enough time to rebuild that system up to where if you do end up making a trade for a Jack Eichel and it doesn't work out, obviously that pick's probably going to be moved. But essentially, you're looking at Fedor Svechkov. I think he's a great long-term, helps you develop later on, and he's not going to make an instant impact, but should still help you out. And the second guy I have is Cole Sillinger. He's a center, and I think he fits a need there too.
Oh man, Sillinger, huh? I don't know what it is. I don't trust him yet. Now I keep wanting to say Svechnikov, like we're talking about
exactly,
the Hurricane. But not that Svechnikov. I don't think he will be the pick in the first round for the Rangers because I don't think he fits their current timeline since he's such a developmental project. Even if they are looking to rebuild their system in a couple of years, they're going to look to do it down the road. They're not going to be looking to build their 2024 farm system right now. So I would be surprised, but I do like the upside. He has got some tantalizing potential there. Now, I obviously want the Rangers to win hockey games too. And if we win just one Stanley Cup, during this window, even if they suck for 20 years after that, it is worth it. Yeah, that is the goal here. They have to win at least one Stanley Cup though for it to matter. That's the whole point. Eichel is not just a short-term play. He is under contract for 5 more years. He is only 24 years old. So it's not like he's, hopefully he hasn't peaked yet. He's not declining yet, but he's risky because of the contract and more importantly, the neck injury that he's dealing with, which is pretty serious. As a Giants fan, we drafted David Wilson a few years ago in the first round. He lasted a year and a half. He had a neck injury. He had to stop playing so he basically wouldn't get paralyzed. And right choice. But I'm just saying it's not out of the realm of possibility that something similar could happen here. And Eichel might still need to get surgery. I know the medicals are being talked about. There's just a lot of variables. If he was 100% healthy, it'd be a way bigger no-brainer of a trade. I talked in the past, possibly Buchnevich, Hedl, a prospect and a first-round pick, the 15th pick. I would still at least be willing to do that if Buchnevich is not going to be re-signed. You might as well throw him somewhere and get something for him. Hedl or Strome, I think, is going back either way in a trade, whether it's for Eichel, whether it's Evgeny Kuznetsov, whether it's Barkov in a few months at the trade deadline. There's a lot of possibilities. I think the Rangers are going for a left-handed defenseman, whether it's Giordano, whether it's a guy like Vince Dunn, which I wouldn't be very happy with. They're going to make some moves here. And they're going to get Gaudreau locked up. They got a couple restricted free agents to keep around, or in Buchnevich's case, dangle as a trade chip. It's exciting, but it's also terrifying because I want them to win a cup. I don't think they're close enough where they're going to become a contender this offseason. I just don't see it.
The Rangers have the 16th pick. What is the percentage that they trade that pick?
I think it's 100%. I do not think they're making the pick, but I'll see if they prove me wrong. What do you think?
I got a 90% chance on them. And one team that has a 0% chance of picking in the first round is the New York Islanders. And I think we're 100% on board with the 0% there. A lot of percents, but we're about it. And the one player they lost in the expansion draft was Jordan Eberle, and that sort of stings. Like, if you're a fan of the Islanders, he's been around. He's been obviously started in Edmonton, but he's been a nice player for the Islanders for many years now, and I think that he has a nice spot on that team. But unfortunately, it's sad to see someone like that that's a fan favorite leave the building and someone that does score a decent amount.
Eberle is a tough pill to swallow. And for anyone who doesn't know, the reason the Islanders are not making a first round pick is because they traded it to the Devils at the trade deadline for Kyle Palmieri and Travis Zajac. So that's the reason we're confident there, unless they trade for a first round pick, but that seems highly unlikely to happen. So that's what we're talking about there. In terms of their expansion draft, Eberle is a player that will, who's a legitimate top 6 player who provides some offense, who had some chemistry with Matt Barzal. And he's also a player that was on a relatively affordable contract. And the Islanders, who have been, like we've mentioned before, strapped up salary cap hell in recent years, they've made a few recent moves to alleviate some of that money, and they have and losing Eberle will give them some more financial flexibility. But excuse me, but if you are the Islanders, you don't want to lose a talented offensive player and get nothing in return for it. And it looks like that's exactly what happened. Like cap space, while it is valuable, been gained, you could have traded Eberle for something and at least gotten something in return along with the cap space. And we saw a similar issue play out with when the Devontae's trade to Colorado. And part of the other reason for this is guys like Matt Martin and Cal Clutterbuck had to be protected when while they're very good fourth line players, they're still fourth line players. They don't put the puck in the net or have that same offensive impact. I do think it is an important loss, but the Islanders have a lot of capability now, both with re-signing their own free agents and possibly going out and signing somebody off the market as well.
Yeah, they cleared up some cap space big time with the move of Andrew Ladd and then moving Nick Leddy to the Detroit Red Wings. So there's not really a lot going on with this hockey team. I mean, right now it seems like their main goal is to just bring back their guys, and that's what the plan was last year. They had to do it creatively by putting Andrew Ladd on the long-term IR. They had to get creative for sure. And then when they had some cap space at the deadline with the Anders Lee injury, they end up making the trade to bring in Zajac and Paul Mary to help them out. So the Islanders are in an interesting spot. They're a contending hockey team. They did lose their not necessarily heart and soul, but a good piece of their team in Jordan Eberle. So I think they're still going to be in great shape. I mean, I truly believe there's no chance they have a first round pick. So, I mean, that's basically it. Do you see anything with the Islanders that really catches your eye on what could take place in free agency of the trades?
Honestly, yes. There were a couple of things that caught my eye. Now, really quick, I'll summarize a couple things that I think we know are givens, but not everyone will. So, just to summarize that. So, first of all, the Islanders now. So, the Leddy trade to the Red Wings freed them up about $5.5 million. They attached 3 draft picks to Andrew Ladd's contract to send him to Arizona, and they literally got nothing in return. They wanted to get out of that contract, which has been a disaster from the day it was signed, so badly that they literally just said, hey, here's 3 draft picks, 2 second rounders and a third. Get them the fuck off our payroll. And we don't need anything for it. Even so, I thought that was funny. But now that they have a decent amount of financial flexibility, they had 3 restricted free agents. They still do, that I think they were going to prioritize re-signing regardless of the Eberle situation or anything else. That's Adam Pelech, Anthony Beauvillier, and Ilya Sorokin. None of them are going anywhere. The Islanders will get them locked up. But even with that now, with the added cap space, they are going to have some money left over. So I want to ask you 2 questions. First question. They had 2 unrestricted free agents that I didn't think had a chance of coming back before, but now they might have the money to do it. Do you think they will try to re-sign either or both of Kyle Palmieri or Casey Cizikas?
Ooh, I think I like Cizikas more than I like Palmieri, and I think that there's a legit shot that Cizikas comes back. I mean, they did free up some money. We've talked about that, and I truly believe, like, Palmieri came over. Palmieri's Palmieri. You know what you're going to get from him, and it's usually not good, especially looking at last year. I mean, he doesn't put up the offensive production that he used to. Like, he's still a decent goal scorer, but I truly believe more in Cizikas. He fits more the Islanders' mold than you would with anything that Palmieri brings.
I think Palmieri is a more talented offensive player, but that a 3 or 4 year contract would likely age poorly. Cizikas, though, I'd argue, you know what he is at this point in his career, too. He's been around a long time. You'd put him back on the 4th line with Martin and Clutterbuck. He would fill his role well, win faceoffs. He's still an important player, but I'd argue you know what you're going to get with him, too, although his contract might age slightly better if you don't load it too much. But I get what you're saying. The other question I wanted to ask, so thinking outside the box, let's say they don't want to bring back their own unrestricted free agents, but they look out into the market at other teams' cast-offs. Now, one that I think is relatively obvious to connect the dots is Zach Parise, who Lou Lamoriello, the GM for the Islanders, was the Devils GM when Zach Parise was drafted a ways back. And now that they wouldn't have to worry about the exorbitant contract the Wild gave him, he would be signed pretty cheap if they want him. But this is the New York Islanders. And this is a team that's going to be aggressive to try to win a Stanley Cup. They have been aggressive in free agency with Ladd and John Gabriel Pageau, among others, in recent years. And it looks like there might be a very good player who might become available, who's disgruntled with his current team, who would unfortunately fit very well in the top 6. How aggressively, if at all, do you think the Islanders will pursue Gabriel Landeskog?
Oh man. Oh man, I think they would. I think they go all in to get Gabriel Landeskog. It would set them back again. They finally get the cap space and they're finally hitting it again at the top. I mean, they're maxing out, so they're spending all the money. If you're at a Dave and Buster's and you get a bunch of coins, you're going to use all your coins before you leave, and that's what the Islanders will be doing if they end up bringing in a Gabriel Landeskog. He helps them out a ton. I mean, I don't think you can argue. A team that struggles to score goals, you bring in a Landeskog, that's going to help you immensely. So Landeskog, I think, would be a great fit there. He puts the puck in the back of the net, does a lot of things well, and he should do a nice job of fitting in with that team. I think he is a legit and a number one priority for this Islanders team now with this newfound cap space.
And I don't want to see him end up there just because he's a very good player. And I wonder if the Rangers would consider trying to sign him if they do not end up making a trade for a center. But I find that unlikely. So I think he's going to be getting big money if Colorado is not going to be able to re-sign him, which seems like it's a legitimate possibility right now that he does not stay with the Avalanche. And he's a damn good player. And he would help the Islanders in a lot of ways on the ice, at least originally. Odds are his contract would be a long one that wouldn't age very well. Similar to the Rangers logic, if the Islanders win a cup in the first couple of years of it, they'll deal with any bullshit that happens afterwards. That's the whole goal. Now, again, so a disclaimer, I hope they don't win regardless, but I think that's what they're going to be thinking at. And they have a lot of options to do it. The rest of the team is relatively set in stone here. I'm curious to see who they get on defense to replace Nick Leddy. It's possible maybe they go for an Alec Martinez, somebody like that who could fill in on the left side of the defense. And just saying that name, I know it makes me.
Yeah, I just threw up in my mouth.
Mm-hmm. But he's definitely somebody that I think both the Rangers and Islanders could be interested in because they're both looking for left-handed defensemen. He fits the bill. There's not a ton on the free agent market, so I'm really curious to see what happens there.
Yeah, it could be a nice spot for him. Before we wrap up, I want to give out one thing real quick with Gabriel Landeskog. Could this potentially be a Marian Hossa signing?
Is he allergic to his own equipment?
Oh, that stings. I don't think he is.
As it did for him.
Right.
Anyway, I don't know. I mean, the CBA is a little different now. You can't even give him a Marian Hossa contract anymore. So the best they could do is an 8-year deal, right? I could see that. I could definitely see that deal being signed. That's really front loaded. Yeah, which means more money at the beginning of the contract than later, so they can try to trade it let down the line. But I can't see it being any more extreme than that. Even with the trades, the Islanders only have so much money because they got to get Pelech and Beauvillier and Sorokin locked up first.
Yep, and that's a good point. Looking at Arizona real quick, I'm so stoked for them this year. You got Chris Pronger, Marian Hossa, Pavel Datsyuk, Andrew Ladd. I mean, they're going to light the league on fire this year.
Oh, man, they're trying to win the 2012 Stanley Cup Finals.
Flip it around, baby. Flip the 2 and the 1 around. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for today. I appreciate everybody that tuned in. Broke down the NHL draft is going to take place. It's taking place this weekend. Should be a lot of fun. Starts on Friday. And should be a lot of moves happening here soon. So stay tuned. We'll be sure to bring you some NBA content coming up next week. Head on over to YouTube, click subscribe. Apple Podcasts, make sure you head on over there, click subscribe as well. Also on Spotify, you can leave a review anywhere, and we will try to get back to that. Leave a comment. We can pop them up here on the screen and see what anything else has been taking place. So I appreciate everybody tuning in. And for Slig, I'm Dylan Kearns. This is a Big City Sports Podcast, and we will see you next time.